Hello fourth year students. So today we are going to have a new poem which is called Futility by Wilfred Owen, and this is a really interesting let's say poem in terms of modern poetry. When we are speaking about modern poetry, we have to go through some examples of war poetry, because when we speak about the modern age, one of the most influential, can say, historical events that took place in this period is the war, and specifically two world wars that they have changed. Actually, they have changed the face of the whole world. Societies, the economy, the history, the politics have totally changed after these two wars. Okay, so our example of war poetry would be this poem Futility by Wilfred Owen, and this is Wilfred Owen. This is his image. Before we start with the poem itself, we need to know something about war poetry in general. Why there is this term which is called war poetry. World War One, and this is because our poem is written in this period. World War One was characterized by a distinct form of brutality and loss. So when we speak about war, what do we expect? Of course, it's not something pleasant. There are, let's say, mortalities, people killed, destruction, and we speak about people, millions of people actually were killed in these wars. We have brutality, we have, let's say, very ugly and very austere and harsh ways of torturing and killing people, causing people to lose their lives, and sometimes they get injured or they get psychologically disturbed and conflicted because of war. Not all the injuries of war are physical, sometimes they are psychological, and the psychological actually are very deep. So, due to the new wave of combat technology in the early 20th century and to the harsh fighting conditions of a trench warfare, so we are speaking about atrocities of the war. And you see, with the development that was actually that started in the Industrial Revolution and continued till the modern age, still the scientific progress and development created new inventions, new ways, new weapons, new technologies. And unfortunately, these technologies, these new inventions were used in these wars and caused much brutality and much, let's say, atrocities than before. The new inventions made people become, let's say, more brutal, more aggressive. They helped them to be more aggressive than before. Okay, so when we speak about the First World War, for example, the English it was the first time that the English used the tank. الدبابة أول مرة استخدمت الدبابة بالحرب العالمية الأولى، كانت من قبل الإنجليز. So these new things that sorry, the new technologies that were used actually contributed to making this more horrible. Okay, so and actually those who were fighting in these wars, actually they were young men, and we see that actually Wilfred Owen himself was a soldier. He wasn't a poet in the first place, he was a soldier, and he fought in the First World War. Okay, Wilfred Owen, you see, he was an English poet and soldier of Welsh origins. He's one of the leading poets of the First World War, actually, because those soldiers, they experienced war in the front lines. They were in the front lines, الخطوط الأمامية, the front lines. They were fighting, and they have seen actually what war is like for real. They are the people who really know what war is like. Okay, not those people who are sitting, for example, in the safe places and giving orders and commands, the great leaders. When we speak about war, the only people who really know what war is like are the soldiers who were fighting inside these wars in the front lines. Okay, so his shocking realistic war poetry on the horrors of trenches and gas warfare was heavily influenced by his friend Wilfred Sasson, and set in stark contrast to both the public perception of war at the time and to the confidently patriotic verse written earlier by war poets such as Robert Brooke. So when we speak about war poetry, actually there is another kind of war poetry. We find those who actually glorify war because they believe that war is important for the power of the nation. So they glorify war. And one of those poets is Robert Brooke. Okay, instead of saying that war is bad, for example, or there are atrocities in the war, killing and condemning war, he was glorifying war. Okay, unlike, for example, Sigurd Sasson and Wilfred Owen, these poets actually, because they were soldiers and they have experienced real war, so they were against war and they were trying all the time to show realistic pictures, realistic depictions of what happens in the battlefield. Okay, and he was here we're talking about Wilfred Owen. He was influenced in his poetry by Sigurd Sasson, so we can think of Wilfred Owen as a soldier who wrote poetry in order to express what he felt or what he saw in war in a very realistic manner. Okay, I guess maybe he wouldn't be a poet if it wasn't for this experience. We assume this. So what do we need to know about this poem, Futility? Unlike Owen's other poems, which contain violent bodily imagery, actually when we read Owen's poetry, if you go back to other examples, other poems, you will find that he describes in details how the killing happens, for example, or how the soldier was suffocated with gas. You find exact detailed description, and when you read, actually you feel discomfort. Actually, these poems very, very realistic. But in this poem, we don't find this. What do we find instead? This poem features a calmer, more resigned tone, underlining the speaker's act of mourning the futility of life in the face of death. So this is more philosophical. This poem has more philosophy in it than, let's say, real and active or vivid descriptions. There is more philosophy, something metaphysical in this poem. So it speaks about the futility, the insignificance of life in the face of death. So the setting of Futility is a battlefield in France, because we know they were fighting there, presumably during World War I, which was also the setting of Wilfred's own experience as a soldier. So now what do we know about the poem? First of all, we know that the poet he himself was a soldier in war. He fought in war and he was able to see for himself what kind of atrocities war has. He has a real experience, a true one. And when we speak about war poetry, we speak about two kinds of poetry: the poetry which glorifies war, and another poetry which condemns war. And our poet, is on the part of the poets who condemn war. Okay. What do we know about also the poem? We don't expect actually in this poem to find any descriptions like we have, for example, in other poems by Wilfred Owen. We see here that Wilfred Owen is more philosophical. He's trying to show some kind of general idea, general philosophical maybe idea about life and death and the meaning of life. Okay, so let's go through the poem, and actually it's a really short poem. Okay, so it's not actually a very long poem. Move him into the sun, gently, its touch woke him once. So from the very beginning, we see that here there is a reference to someone with the pronoun him. But who is this person? I mean, we find him used when in the beginning we have first mentioned someone, and then you refer to them as him or her. But here our speaker is giving us directly the setting of this poem. So there is someone here, And there are other people around him, around this person, and they are speaking about moving this person, move him into the sun, but not just moving him into the sun so that he's exposed to the sunlight. Move him into the sun gently, but try to be gentle when you are moving him. Don't force him, for example. Don't pull him so hard. Move him gently. Why? Here we suppose that this is a battlefield, okay? And this him that the poem is talking about is a soldier. Actually, and he's a wounded soldier. A soldier. And the other soldiers around him, they are trying to see whether he's still alive or if there is any hope that he could be still, that he could still be alive. So they trying to do so. They are trying to move him gently because he's wounded. We don't want to hurt him more. Just gently move him into the sun. Maybe the sun could be good for him. Okay? Its touch awoke him once. Actually, the sun has this quality of giving life, awakening. I mean, in the morning, what makes people, if you want to make someone wake up, you expose them to the sunlight. For example, you move the curtains and the sunlight comes to their eyes and they are awake. So actually, the sun has this power, and it sure has wakened him before. What about this time when he is wounded in the battlefield? Maybe if we moved him under the sun, he could wake up. Okay, so the poet begins the poem talking of a certain him. We don't know who he is. He could represent all soldiers damaged by war or a specific soldier. So here, maybe, of course, each life matters. But the problem here with war is the soldiers, unfortunately, they are not given names or specific names. And when, in terms of the suffering of war, they are all equal. Okay, they all suffer. They all have this equal suffering in war. So when we speak about one of them, as if you are speaking about all of them. So one of them could be a representative of all these the people suffering in war, all the soldiers suffering. Okay, so maybe this is why it is not specified here. Who is the soldier exactly? Okay, so at home. So at home, when he was in his country, in his homeland before war, maybe he used to walk under the sun, and the touch of the sun woke him before. Whispering of fields half sown. So there in the homeland, in his own country, maybe he used to walk in these fields, feeling the warmth of the sun. You see, this is a contrast. Here the poet is trying to make a contrast between the battlefield and the homeland, the fields, the beautiful places in homeland, unlike or in opposition to the battlefield, which is very bleak and filled with, let's say, smoke, fire, bombs, all these different things that we find in war. And you see what kind of fields? Half sown, half sown. So the sun's touch is gentle, and it's a metaphor for the giver of life. Actually, sun is part of the reason that there is life on earth. Without the sun, there is no life on earth. It gives life. Okay, it has this quality. So at his home country, the soldier perhaps was a farmer. Maybe he was a farmer. He used to go under the sun. He used to go to these farms, okay, the fields. The contrast between the warmth of home, you see, here is the poet is trying to establish this contrast. You make us feel it. The warmth of the home and the coldness of the war battlefields. Actually, in war, it's really cold. And notice here when he says, always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. So till this moment and when he gets injured and he is almost dead, and everything around is cold and snowy and it's very cold. Where is the sun? Can the sun be giving life in this situation? Can it do this thing that it usually does with its warmth? You see, this is kind of question here. Maybe the poet is trying to raise this contrast in our minds as readers. Okay, despite the sun's life-giving properties, it can do nothing for the young man. Unfortunately, we know actually if someone is about to die, the sun, what could the sun do for them? You see, it doesn't have this ability. It can do nothing for the young man. His life is cut short, like the fields have sown. This was a reality known all too well to the poet. Young men were being killed before their lives had barely begun. So, half sown fields, you see, something which is still undone. So maybe this soldier who's now hurt and wounded and dead, um, maybe he left things in his homeland halfly done or undone completely. Because you see, when war happens, people are gathered, the soldiers, they are taken from their homeland in order, the young men, they are taken from their homeland in order to go fight in the war. So they leave behind their lives. They leave everything behind, their future, their lives, their works, their families, things that they may, projects maybe they have started, but they couldn't complete because they have to go to war. So unfortunately, these young people, these young soldiers, their lives ended in war before it even started. Okay, this is the unfortunate reality about war. Okay, this is what war is all about. Okay, so maybe this is what the poet is trying to show here with this wounded soldier. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. So if there is any possibility, if there is any possibility that this soldier could wake up with the sunlight, this could have happened, because the sun is as old as this universe. I mean, it gives life since millions of years, but in this case, it couldn't. There's a contrast between past and present. So you see, he's trying to show this continuity, okay, of this misery, of human misery, to show effect of war on the life of the soldier. Okay, the sun in the battlefield seems helpless in the face of war. It could not bring him to life. So when it comes to war, even the sun couldn't do what it is known for, as giving life to things. Okay, so let's bring this here. I think there is a problem with these slides, just to make things all appear here. Okay, so think how it wakes the seeds. So we all know that if you want to grow plants, if you put the seeds in the ground and you cover them and then you give them water, and what else? The sun, the sunlight. These two things, water and sunlight, they make things, they make the seeds grow and become maybe trees, plants. So actually this is something that the sun does to the seed. You see, think how it wakes the seeds. Woke once the clays of a cold star. So the speaker is confused how the sun could wake the seeds and animate a fully formed man. So the biblical here, just to make this clear here. So even human beings, actually, we are made of clay. According to the Bible, this is a biblical account, the biblical clay of Adam, because people are made of clay. هذا حتى عندنا بالإسلام أيضا، الإنسان مخلوق من طين, and now can do nothing. So in the beginning, actually, the beginning of life, man was given this life through the warmth of the sun. The seeds are given life through the warmth of the sun. How could the sun now not be able to give life to this dead soldier? Okay, you see here the speaker is not asking questions to know answers. He's actually asking in a kind of a protest, احتجاج, as if he's blaming or he's protesting. Our limbs here means hands and foot, right? الأطراف يعني الأيدي والأرجل. So dear achieved, our sides full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir. See, these limbs, these hands, and these legs, the legs of this dead soldier, so dear achieved. You know how, you know, the creation of a human being is not easy, and we all know this. How many months the mothers carry their children inside their wombs? 9 months. 9 أشهر. ولادة الإنسان تستغرق 9 أشهر، لكن موته يستغرق ممكن دقيقة أو ثانية واحدة. This is this is what what's making the speaker confused here, the poet. These limbs, 9 months in the wombs of the mothers, they were created. They are so dear. Okay, the sides that are filled with nerves, because nerves, you see, how can you feel things through your nerves? All this body that was created through these 9 months, and then the delivery of this child, you know, the pains that the mother go through. So the birth of human beings comes with pain, right? It comes with pain. And that's what makes human life so precious, so dear, so precious. So is it not this enough reason for the sun to be able to bring life to this body? Is it hard to bring them back to life, these limbs, these sides? See? So the poet speaks with an angry and desperate tone. This is actually shows how angry he is. He thinks, sorry, here we have an S. He thinks that creating life is pointless. Why is it pointless? As long as it could be ended so quickly and easily. So if this precious life could end so easily with a bullet, for example, with a knife or with whatever weapon, okay, so why creating life in the first place? This loss of one precious life makes the speaker bitterly wonder why the fatuous sunbeams toil to break the earth's sleep at home. Okay, so here in the second stanza, you notice actually there are a lot of questions. In the beginning, he was just describing what the scene is like, and then now in the second stanza, he's asking questions, and these are not questions to be answered. Actually, these are wonderings, and we notice the tone here is of anger and desperation, despair. Okay, was it for this the clay grew tall? Is it for this end, for this horrible end, that a man is born and he lives and he grows up and become tall, full, healthy person, young person, to come to this end, to be killed like this, to have this destiny in the end? Why? This is pointless. So the speaker is really desperate here. Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? So the because of the atrocities the poet has witnessed, actually, now he's really angry, and he's not only asking about the meaning of man's life, he's even taking this question to something bigger, which is what's even the point of having the whole existence? Okay, this is an existential question. The meaning of the title then is the futility. So if we try to give answers to these questions, and actually, as I told you, there is no need, but if we try to answer, what would be the answer? It would be the title of the poem, Futility. Futility. Okay? So the meaning of the title then is the futility of trying to understand how nature could create life, but stand by as it is laid to waste. So this is a protest from the speaker because of the atrocities and horrible things that he saw in war, the kind of death he saw that innocent soldiers are facing. This made him ask these questions. Why nature is not able to give back life to these people? Why is it so easy to take lives and make people die like this? So the intensity with which the speaker asked these questions shows how much he or she cared about this fallen soldier. And actually this shows how deeply the war has affected psychologically the soldiers and the people in general. And those poets who were actually able to transform to us these feelings showed us exactly what is it like, the war, what is the reality of war. No matter how other poets maybe glorify war and shows that this is something necessary for the power of this country or that country, but still war is something horrible and it only leaves people dead and psychologically corrupted. You see, so this is a very, very short poem, but at the same time it is loaded with meaning. Okay, so finally we see that the death of this soldier made our poet really angry and desperate. So above all, notice what Owen has said about his poetry. Above all I am not concerned with poetry. My subject is war and the pity of war. The poetry is in the pity. So actually he wasn't actually really interested in writing poetry for poetry. He was trying to show war for what it is, the reality of war. And I guess if you go and read other poems by Wilfred Owen, you will see that actually he was really good in showing what war is like, the atrocities of war. So this was our poem, Futility.